Hey there, everyone. Steve Gruber here from Venture Accelerate Partners. Today I thought I'd like to talk to you about, how to improve your closing success in B2B sales. Obviously that really matters, um, because in sales, really closing is sort of everything. So I think we all know B2B selling is inherently tough. No one bats 100% here. Competition is always tough and fierce. And even then, the thing to remember, those small improvements in closing rates can really make a difference in growth, right? 5 or 10% more closes or wins, can sometimes lead to, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% more return on revenue. So I think a couple things to remember here. Plan for your sales cycle, if you're doing B2B sales, to be 12 to 18 months long. I mean, I say especially for startups, but it's actually for any company in B2B sales. It's very rarely, at least in my opinion, and I'd love to have a conversation with somebody where they're closing things faster. Huge thing, particularly for startups, don't run out of resources before you start closing business. What happens a lot of times is you build something, you think and then you just keep building it and building it up further and building it up further. And all of a sudden you think, I've got the greatest products in sliced bread and people buy this in 3 months. But what you've done is left yourself only 3 months of cash, and sales takes time. So don't run out of runway before you run out of cash, basically. So give yourself enough time, to sell some things. And, tied to the one I just said there before, like, make sure you're building a pipeline over time. Okay. And it's got to be reliable. And to do that, you got to be doing it consistently. And so you want to have enough things in your sales funnel that you're not worried about what closes, because something will always be closing. And I think, again, I've said it before, and I think if you looked at all my presentations, I sort of mentioned these numbers, but you've got to do a cadence of regular calls, emails, booking meetings, and obviously all of that lead to more conversions. I think a key piece in here, and I've done a presentation on as well, is make sure you're doing calls. We've seen a tremendous amount of success, more so than ever before, in making cold calls. Emails just aren't doing it. One thing I learned a long time ago, it's always about the number. So every single no is one step closer to a yes. So years ago, I used to paint houses, and I know we used to do a lot of door knocking. And I remember one of my mentors there had always said, "Listen, every time you get a no, it's one step closer to a yes." So this goes back to what I've said before too, about how many touches you need to do to close something. At least 8 to 13, in my opinion, if you're doing B2B sales, and if the prospect is an ideal target. If you're doing mass campaigns and you're doing thousands of emails, well, that's different. You might not be able to do 8 to 13 touches. But if you're doing account-based sales and you have a short list of targets, you might do that or even more. Some ways to improve your closing, broaden the relationships you have beyond one single point of contact. Person goes on vacation, person leaves, person gets sick, person gets promoted. You have some bench depth in your prospects. Know your prospect's budget, decision process, and influencers. Tailor your approach to their buying cycle. OPEX versus CAPEX is really important. Use storytelling and results to build credibility. Super important. And that's it for today. So I wish you the best of luck in your sales closing. If you need any assistance, feel free to reach out. We would love to talk to you, learn about what you're doing, and see how we can provide some assistance or even some tips.